Hi everyone, and welcome to another Sunday Talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. I'm one of your two hosts, Noor Kyle, along with...
The other one of your two hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
And we want to thank you for joining us. I did not get to join you guys last week, so I'm very happy to be able to participate this week. I am sort of kind of on a working vacation right now, visiting my family and such. Meanwhile, Mushtaq is slumming it at home. But that's good. All right, so we need to do our little spiel.
All right. So, first of all, if this is you watching this on YouTube, welcome. If it's your first time watching on YouTube, welcome twice. And I would like to ask all of every one of you to take a moment to consider looking down to your right, finding that thumbs up button, and hitting it really hard. Bam! Because those likes get us up in YouTube's algorithm somehow in ways that are obscure to us. But it helps for people to find us.
It's a bit arcane, but we know that it helps, so...
Yeah, so
we would definitely appreciate it.
All the likes. And if you hate us, you can hit the hate button too. We like the hates as well. Not as much as we like the likes, but there is that. Leave a comment. Leave a comment in the comment section. We love to hear from you. We try and answer every single question that is put to us and reply to every single comment.
Yep.
Some days are better than others, but we do get to them.
Sooner or later.
Yeah,
usually sooner.
We have some nice dialogues in the comment section down there.
Yeah, we do. So, thank you for those who have commented and engaged in some pretty great conversations with us. We hope for more of that.
Oh, and we have really exciting news. We have surpassed 500, count them, 500 subscribers.
Yeah, yay, thumbs up from Chris, thank you, and Levita, yeah. We're very excited. This brings us halfway to our goal, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, because they're still putting these stupid commercials in front of a bunch of our videos, and they are of things that we would not, under any circumstances, support.
Yeah, we do not endorse these things. No.
Yeah, if you see something in front of our videos, some ad from one of these pseudo-spiritual places that really want all of your money, we didn't ask those ads to be there. We do not profit from them.
Nope.
So just bear that in mind.
So, yeah, we have a few links below in the description. You can find our Facebook page and our forum. If you'd like to donate, that's cool. No pressure. We also have a little bit of swag that some people have said they really... they give it a thumbs up. They think the quality is good, all that stuff. Again, no pressure, but they're pretty cool shirts. Yeah.
You'll feel better if you have one of our nine-sided circles. And nobody will know because it doesn't say nine-sided circle.
Yeah, it's our logo, but it's pretty, you know, we're
you
not
will not need a billboard for us because we hate that.
So that's what we got for the spiel, pretty much. So today,
but also let me specifically state that we would love, if you have not subscribed to us, we would really love for you to subscribe to us. It would make us so happy. Every time we get a subscriber, we do a happy dance.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yep. We're halfway to 1,000.
Sing a happy song.
Oh my gosh.
She does sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
All right. So our topic tonight, well, we are actually going to be doing a little storytelling again this evening. And this is going to be a story about the Buddha and the river. And this is a teaching story.
Shall I leap into this?
I would love it. Go for it.
All right. Here's the story. One evening, the teacher came into the semakhana and sat on the sheepskin at her place within the circle. Addressing the fellowship, she said, "There is a story of Gautama Buddha that is usually only told in part. The part that is spoken of is often quoted by people who would like to make a spiritual path that is comfortable for them, one where they can pick and choose their lessons. This is the story as it's usually told. The Buddha asked his disciples how they would get across the river. 'With a boat,' they replied. The Buddha asked, 'When you arrived at the other shore, would you carry the boat with you, or would you leave it on the banks?' The disciples replied, 'We would leave it on the banks and go on without it.' The Buddha said, 'In the same way, when you arrive on the other side of the river, you may leave the boat of doctrine and practice.' Here's the rest of the story," the teacher said. The Buddha and his disciples came to a river, and taking a boat, crossed. The Buddha then delivered the parable given above. The disciples, understanding the meaning of the story, left the boat on the banks and followed Buddha on his journey. In a few hours, they came to another river. The Buddha sat under a tree laughing and waited for his disciples to go back and fetch the boat they had left on the shores of the first river. After giving the story to the students, the teacher picked up a small worn book that she kept with her always and read this poem to the circle. "It is not a thing that you get, it is a process. It doesn't matter what poetry you quote. The poet means what he means, not what you wish he meant. No matter how often you call a weed a rose, it never changes its scent. And the only river that matters is the one that you find at the end of your life. The question is, when you reach the banks, have you developed the strength and discipline you will need to make it to the other side, or will you be swept away into oblivion? Thinking about enlightenment is not the same as being awake. The map is not the territory, but if you insist that you are in Isfahan when you are in Shiraz, you will never make it to Mecca, no matter how good your map is. Oh, Mushtaq! The saddest ones of all are the ones who, thinking that they see the shore, leave the boat in the middle of the river and then tell us that breathing water is enlightenment." That's the story. It's a short one. What do you think it means? Don't everybody talk at once.
So, Chris, I see you unmuted.
I was picturing myself in the process of dying and holding on to self-witnessing and dropping into self-witnessing, moving through the bardo, and all this stuff's going on, and moving towards light, and that process. Self-witnessing. Pretty wild.
Yeah, and what did you learn from that imagining?
Self-witnessing is important, therefore breathing practice is important.
I'll buy that.
I didn't hear the last of that. I just want to make sure. So self-witnessing is important, and
Therefore breathing practice is important.
Yes.
got it. Yeah. Got it. Self-witnessing is important, therefore breathing practice is important. Yep.
And breathing water sucks.
It's a little ouchy. Yeah.
The whole rest of the talk is going to be us discussing this, so you might as well start jumping in.
I mean, we can always read it twice, too.
Yeah.
I can read it the second time.
Yeah, you should read it the second time, in a moment or two.
Sure.
Well, one possible idea is that the students should have asked whether they needed the boat instead of just assuming that they didn't.
Yeah?
That's a good point. Yeah. Could have done that, couldn't they? Would anyone else like to chime in? Thanks, Nancy.
Welcome.
You could say that assumptions will make you walk much further than you need to.
That's a good way to put it.
Come on,
Definitely
Jonathan.
often true.
I have high
Yeah.
hopes for you with this one.
Yeah, there were so many details in it. All right, so I'm trying to discover the significance of the river, and we're not going down the river, we're crossing the river in this story. So the river represents the challenges, the obstacles that you have to pass through. But there's another river, and maybe another river after then, and then there's a river at the end, which that confused me.
Well, think about the first time you had a realization. Think back. You had this realization. It woke you up. Was that the only realization you needed?
Actually,
that
I thought
realization
at the
finish the
time, I thought that was all I needed.
Yeah.
I thought
How
I
did that
was
work
there.
out for you?
I was disappointed.
Yeah.
The realization vanished. But it became a beacon for me to move towards
Yeah.
again, to re-find it again and again.
And sometimes there are like increasing, like you have a particular realization and then the next one is perhaps renewed or a little different or more expansive perhaps. So we're not always coming back to the same one per se. In fact, I would say we generally don't do that at all. But yeah. There's definitely some. What's that?
They might have taken the boat with them, just only to find out that the next river was so far that they had to dump the boat. It was just a burden to them. The boat worked for the first river, but there wasn't a second river.
Then you know what you do? You sell the boat and use the money to buy a good meal. And the fact of the matter is that there was a second river. There's basically always a second river. The Enneagram tells us there's going to be two rivers. This process of you going from point A to point B, there's going to be two rivers to cross. And then when you get to point B, you're going to start all over again.
That's a very good point. Yeah. All right. So, is it all right if I tie Aaron's and Chris's comments into this?
Yes, please.
Okay, so Aaron says, I'm imagining building a house rather than crossing a river. If you sell your tools after you build your house, where are you if the house falls apart?
Yes, or where are you if you have to add an addition? Or where are you if you need a barn? Or where are you if you want to make a boat? That's a very good point.
Chris says, I think this is how he's conceptualizing this. Crossing samsara to nirvana and abiding in self-witnessing even in nirvana.
Yeah. for those who want nirvana.
Hmm.
You know what nirvana actually means, right? It's a Sanskrit word. It means extinction. If you want extinction, you go for nirvana. For some of us, if we're getting all Sanskrit, what we want is moksha. Moksha means liberation. Liberation may mean learning how to swim so you don't need the boat.
Mm-hmm. Mustakim says, my understanding is that the river equals challenge in life, and the boat equals the work or practice. Is this about right? That's how I would verbalize what he wrote. Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that too. Yep. Levita offers, be present to our surroundings, the people with us, and what is needed now and for the future. Leave behind what isn't necessary.
I would say leave behind what isn't necessary when it is no longer necessary.
Yep.
Nor,
Yes,
why don't you read the story again?
I will read the story again.
You have a prettier voice than me anyway.
Well, I think it's helpful to repeat things after.
Then we're going to take the story apart.
Yeah. All right. The Buddha and the River. One evening, the teacher came into the semakhane and sat on the sheepskin at her place within the circle. Addressing the fellowship, she said, "There is a story of Gautama Buddha that is usually told only in part. The part that is spoken of is often quoted by people who would like to make a spiritual path that is comfortable for them, one where they can pick and choose their lessons. This is the story as it is usually told." She went on. The Buddha asked his disciples how they would get across a river. "With a boat," they replied. The Buddha asked, "When you arrived at the other shore, would you carry the boat with you, or would you leave it on the banks?" The disciples replied, "We would leave it on the banks and go on without it." The Buddha said, "In the same way, when you arrive at the other side of the river, you may leave the boat of doctrine and practice." Here is the rest of the story, the teacher said after a moment. The Buddha and his disciples came to a river and, taking a boat, crossed. The Buddha then delivered the parable given above. The disciples, understanding the meaning of the story, left the boat on the banks and followed Buddha on his journey. In a few hours, they came to another river. Buddha sat under a tree laughing and waited for his disciples to go back and fetch the boat they left on the shore of the first river. After giving the story to the students, the teacher picked up a small, worn book that she kept with her always and read this poem to the circle. It is not a thing that you get. It is a process. It doesn't matter what poetry you quote. The poet means what he means, not what you wish he meant. No matter how often you call a weed a rose, you will never change its scent. And the only river that matters is the one that you find at the end of your life. The question is, when you reach the banks, have you developed the strength and discipline you will need to make it to the other side? Or will you be swept away into oblivion? Thinking about enlightenment is not the same as being awake. The map is not the territory. But if you insist that you were in Isfahan when you were in Shiraz, you will never make it to Mecca, no matter how good your map is. O Mushtaq, the saddest ones of all are the ones who, thinking they see the shore, leave the boat in the middle of the river and then tell us that breathing water is enlightenment.
There we go. Part 2.
Yeah.
So did that help a little bit?
Yes, Jonathan, that helped. Good. Yeah.
So let's take this part by part.
Jonathan, what's up?
Okay. So they used the boat to cross the first river. It proved itself to be valuable. Even though the Buddha said or suggested that this boat might really only be just doctrine, that you might want to leave it behind.
Is that what he suggested, though?
Well, that's what they apparently believed he had suggested, and but it proved itself. It got them across.
Yes.
So there was value. They needed to bring with them what was valuable. What was valuable, what the boat represented, was not a fixed thing like some magical talisman. It was a process, a principle, a working principle that they could potentially use again and again. It didn't have to be this heavy boat that I was picturing that would lumber them down, but it was just something that they just needed to carry with them as a working principle.
Yeah, could have been a canoe.
Right.
Yep.
So here's the question. Here's what I want you to consider. One of the first things. What didn't they do? They didn't say to the Buddha, hey, are we going to need this boat again? Here you have the teacher. You have the Buddha, right? And you don't ask him if you're ready to give up the boat. I imagine that they're sitting there going, oh God, we can give up this boat and not have to carry it now because it's a burden to carry it. Yes, it's a canoe, it's light, it's made out of skins or whatever it's made out of. But we don't have to carry it because we crossed the river without ever asking their teacher, hey, is there going to be another river? And that, in a certain sense, is the meaning of this whole story.
Can you remind me of the beginning of it again? Because I think it wasn't completely clear. Or at least I don't remember exactly what the Buddha said about taking the boat or not.
The Buddha said, let me pull it up for you.
Sure.
I'll read you the original section of the story. The Buddha asked his disciples how they would get across the river. With a boat, they replied. The Buddha asked, when you have arrived at the other shore, would you carry the boat with you, or would you leave it on the banks? The disciples replied, we would leave it on the banks and go on without it. The Buddha said, in the same way, when you arrive at the other side of the river, you may leave the boat of doctrine and practice. Now he's using a very specific metaphor there. When you arrive at the other side of the river, you may leave the boat of doctrine and practice. Meaning, when you have achieved full awakening, when you have achieved permanent non-dual awareness, then, and only then, the tools that you use to get there become somewhat superfluous. Not really, though, because you might have to help somebody else out, but still. But people have used this and statements like this to justify blowing off their practice.
Like a premature
Yeah.
leaving behind.
Mm-hmm. We see this a lot with, in the West, everybody loves Rumi. I'm all blurry again. Come on, focus, focus. Okay, this is me drifting in and out of other dimensions. Sorry about that. So, everybody loves Rumi, except that they hate the fact that he was Muslim. And so you look for certain things that he says in his poems, and you go, see, Rumi wasn't really Muslim, or see, Rumi he totally passed away from being Muslim. And the fact of the matter is that Rumi was an observant Muslim for the entirety of his life. Not only was he an observant Muslim, but he was an expert in Islamic law and jurisprudence and various other things like that. And neither he nor his students ever walked away from the boat of their spiritual practice, regardless. And in the West, they hate that fact. They ignore it. They deny it. Look at my hand. Keep looking at my hand. It's going to change colors. Red, purple, flesh color. And I'm still blurry. Damn it. Here we go. So, this is one of the things that this entire story refers to, is thinking that you can, one, go it alone, because most people can't. There are some people who can. They are the exception, not the rule. Two, that there comes a point where you can decide to give up your practice. And it doesn't work that way. When you get to be full-on, truth-realized being, your practice may or may not fall away from you without you noticing. But you don't ever give it up. Maybe it gives you up.
So you don't necessarily say, oh, I'm over it.
No,
whatever.
If you do that, you ain't over it.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, it seemed like the Buddha was tempting them a little bit.
Probably. He was a little bit of a rascal after all.
Mm-hmm.
The lesson is driven home more poignantly if you have to carry that damn boat after walking back to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That's kind of a realizing of the mistake. Yeah.
And the other thing is that the material from the book is very much about being clueful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is it conceivable that the students should have known they were going to have to cross another river?
Well, if they had paid attention to their map, if they had asked their teacher, if they had inquired of people around the river, what's up ahead of us?
Mm-hmm.
They might have known.
Yeah, we have a few comments.
Mm-hmm.
Did I read Chris's already? They aren't considering that they don't know what's ahead?
Didn't read that one.
Yeah, so that ties in with what you and Nancy are saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mr. Keem says, it's also really useful to know where the shore is, so one does not jump out the boat and end up breathing water.
Oh, yeah. And that is a much more common phenomena than people realize. All of these people who are advertising on our channel, Most of them are various spiritual groups whose names I will not deign to mention because they suck. And there are people who jumped out of the boat in the middle of the river. They're sitting there saying, let me tell you about how to breathe water, and you can give me a lot of money for it. And I pick on them because they have intruded upon us. They chose our channel for someplace that they wanted to advertise. And
Yep.
I would rather have people advertise dog food on this channel than spiritual paths that take you nowhere.
So Levita says, is it like not using a flotation device once you have learned how to swim?
Maybe. I might use a flotation device just because it's fun. Remember, a surfboard is a flotation device. I don't know if you can surf rivers.
If you have a tidal bore, you can do it.
If you have a time of what?
A tidal bore. You know, a wave from the ocean coming up the river. I just saw a video.
Ah, yes. Nora's going to beg out for just a second. I'm sending her off on an errand.
Yeah. Sorry, it's be right back.
Turn off your camera. Okay, now that I have you alone. So, we also have, there was one other thing. Was there one other thing? So, within, let's take a look at the poem for a moment. Yeah, there is that line, it doesn't matter what poetry you quote, the poet means what he means, not what you wish he meant. One of the things that happens all the time is projecting your own desires onto the words of others, especially the words of the great masters and teachers, so that you can pretend that what they're saying is what you want them to say. And this is something that happens with Sufi poets all the time. Not just Sufi poets, I would imagine. It probably happens with any number of poets, but I see it mostly with the Sufi poets.
And that whole passage is a series of reminders that we are living in a real world.
Yes. And it's a world that exists outside of our thoughts about it. It's like no matter how often you call a weed a rose, it will never change its scent. So, what is the conclusion drawn from this?
This is my feeling. The big mistakes to make on the path is to try and define what my goal is using my thinking center or some imagination of what my goal should be. And it's not going to be that because I'm using the wrong center to figure out what my goal, my end goal. I cannot know my end goal. All I can do is feel if I'm moving in the right direction, one step at a time, and continue. And refeel each step. Is this the right direction?
Sounds about right. I would say that you are taking away something valuable with this. So, there's another passage in the poem. Thinking about enlightenment is not the same as being awake. The map is not the territory, but if you insist that you are in Isfahan when you are in Shiraz, you will never make it to Mecca, no matter how good your map is. What do you think that means?
It's probably a warning about intellectualism. You know, you need your map, but you need to connect to the world too.
Yeah. Your map is worthless without a starting point. If you can't go, here's where I am on the map does you literally no good at all. Now, there are some people who can read maps well enough that they can figure out where they are by looking at the terrain if the map is good enough. Most people aren't that person. So how do you figure out where you actually are? Cherie, how do you figure out where you actually are?
This is making me reflect on something that Lawrence helped me with in making choices, because there were times when I didn't know how to make a choice between A and B. And he said, just make a choice, because if it's the wrong choice, you can just change your mind and change your path. And I think that's part of the practice is don't get bogged down and become inert and not do anything. You've got to try and try again. You know, it might not be the right direction, but you'll figure it out soon enough that, oh, shouldn't have left that boat behind. Got to go back, do it again, try again. So we can do this if we can think of our modern life, that sometimes we discard things that we really need. They were useful at one time and then we've let them go, and we've got to be humble enough to be able to say, made a mistake, need to go back and do this. The work never ends. It never ends. So the practice continues, and we have to be humble enough to admit we made a boo-boo or we made a mistake, made an error, go again, try again.
So, if you did this and you discovered you made a mistake after listening to Lawrence's advice, what would be the first thing that you did after you discovered that you made a mistake? Would you
Swallow pride.
say it again?
Swallow pride.
Swallow pride and do what?
Choose the other thing.
Yeah, or would you not have gone back to Lawrence and said, hey, Lawrence, I made a mistake?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I didn't abandon the teacher. So even if the teacher points out my shortcomings, sometimes that happens, as we've seen, that people will think, oh, I've learned enough from you, I'm moving on to the next teacher. So teacher hopping, therapist hopping, group hopping, we've got to watch out for that in our own selves, that we're not looking for the next cool thing, because the work is not really cool. Not very exciting sometimes.
Except that you do get the cool t-shirts.
The cool t-shirt, and I get to breathe again.
Yay.
Take another breath.
The thing is, if you are sitting in Shiraz and you think you're in Isfahan, these are cities in Iran, by the way, which Zainab will know, but everybody else probably won't. Now, you could just assume that you know where you are, or you could ask somebody, hey, what city is this? And after you do that, you might ask a few other people, hey, do you know anybody who has been to Mecca, who is going to be going again? Is there a guide I can follow to Mecca? And if there is, you might want to follow that guide if they seem like they're trustworthy enough and they'll get you there, because some guides are actually bandits. They get you halfway to Mecca, then they kill you, steal all your stuff, and then go back and find other suckers. So, how do you know if somebody is a good guide to Mecca? You check around and say, hey, you went to Mecca with this guy. How did that work out for you? Right? Get a few references. Then you get to Mecca. Otherwise, God knows where you could end up. You could end up in terrible places. You could end up in Oklahoma.
Shade. Throw in the shade.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I've noticed is that if you have a teacher, you got to watch yourself that you don't go to sleep relying on the teacher and riding on the teacher's coattails or energetic coattail, because that happens too. And you can be asleep and think that, oh, I've got a teacher, so that's enough. It's not enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A good teacher will keep you awake.
I kind of see that in this story as well, where they assumed, oh, okay, we're good now, and he said we're cool, so shrug, moving on. And yeah, they just didn't really think practically or for themselves. Yeah.
So, who haven't we heard from yet? Zainab! Can you talk?
I can.
Yay! So what's been coming up for you, Zainab?
The honesty and wanting actually to really get to Mecca as well. So, and willing to hear the truth. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, Mushtaq.
Well, oftentimes in order to hear the truth, you have to give up what you believe. And that's really, really, really hard. You know, if you believe you're in Isfahan, some people, no matter where they are, they could be in Shiraz, they could be in Qum, they could be all of these different places, and they think, oh, this is Isfahan. And somebody comes up and says, you know, this ain't Isfahan. And they go, yeah, it is. I know it is. I read this book that says that it is. And, you know, the person can take them over and say, look, here's a sign with the city name on it. And they still won't believe it. Do you know why this is?
As you mentioned, like projecting their beliefs into reality.
That's the symptom of it. The cause is that people are crazy. Most people, most of the time, are totally insane. You don't realize this. Well, I'm not talking about anybody who's here at this moment joining us with the talk, because, of course, you guys are all sane. But everybody else out there, you know how I figured this out? When I was young, I had to go to college and graduate school. And this was before they had things like, you know, these fat student loans, thank God. And so I found a job, or a series of jobs, that would allow me the time to do my college work and still make money. And that was working in psychiatric hospitals. I discovered that I could do these fast track trainings to get my psych tech license. Took a year instead of 2 years, and then once I had that, I could do a fast track training to get my RN. A psychiatric technician is basically an LVN with a really bad attitude. And so I worked in the locked wards because that was the place that paid me the most and gave me the most interesting challenges. But there was something that I began to notice, which was there was really not that much difference from the people who were locked up in the ward and the people who I ran into on the street. Basically, what you discover when you do that is that the world is one big loony bin. And the people who have a reality that does not meld well with the consensus insanity are the ones who get locked up in the psych wards. But if you meld well with the consensus insanity, the psych ward is just a lot bigger, and it's called the planet Earth. And then that led me to the inevitable question, am I as crazy as everybody else? And the inevitable answer, yeah, shit, damn it. Rats.
Yeah. And that's tough.
Yeah.
But it is true.
Can I ask another question in regards to this?
Of course.
Sure.
So would it be waking up from this that you understand this would be crossing the first river?
Yeah, probably. You know, the first line of that poem, it's not a thing you get, it's a process. That's exactly what it speaks to. It's not an object that you can possess. You cannot set it on your mantle like a trophy for playing golf. It's an ongoing process that starts at birth and probably doesn't end at death. Noor, you look like you're thinking of something.
Oh, I'm good this time. We do have a comment from a couple people, though.
Give it to us.
Yeah, okay, so... Nancy says, a man who'd been institutionalized said that the
Hell of it.
the hell of it was that half of what he was seeing was hallucinations, and the other half was true things that people wouldn't talk about. Blah.
Yeah, and it's true. Once you have had a certain number of hours carrying on deep conversations with schizophrenics and psychotic people, you realize that a lot of what they're talking about has a basis in reality. It's just not parsed in a way that most people can understand. And if you can let them teach you your metaphors, their metaphors, you can communicate with them quite nicely.
Yeah, didn't you have a thing where, like, you kind of went along with the story, even though one of their things is, like, don't, like, validate their delusions?
Don't validate their delusions. Fuck that shit, man. That just makes your life hard. I have a current sample from this guy. Paranoid schizophrenic, right? Literally a tinfoil hat person. Was pretty sure that the CIA was beaming rays into his brain. He was afraid that he had been irradiated by the government. And in 3 days, nobody had been able to get a urine sample from him. So I walked in with the bottle and I go, hey, we need to find out how much radiation you absorb. Pee in this cup for me, would you? He did it so fast it wasn't even funny. People were looking at me like, how did you get that sample from him?
Yeah.
And you know what? After that, he liked me.
Yeah, well, building rapport, I guess.
Yeah, and I never teased him about his tinfoil hat. And he literally had a baseball cap covered in tinfoil.
Mm.
And it's like, I don't care if he has a baseball cap covered in tinfoil. Doesn't hurt me, doesn't hurt anybody else. And that's part of the problem with governmental dealing with crazy people. They don't understand how to separate interesting behaviors from dangerous behaviors. A person is crazy if they're a danger to themselves or others or gravely disabled by reason of mental defect in this country. And wearing a tinfoil hat is none of those. It doesn't hurt anybody. It's not hurting them. It's not hurting anybody around them. It's not stopping them from like feeding themselves or anything. It's just a tinfoil hat that makes them feel better. So, but the trouble is, and this I know for a fact, the psychiatrists who work on the psych wards are at least as crazy as the patients. At least as crazy. They just have more of a consensus insanity.
Can I tell you a thing that was actually a true story recently in the news?
Sure.
Homeless
Go for it.
guy was arrested because the police thought there was a warrant out for him. And he ended up institutionalized for almost 2 years because he kept claiming that he wasn't the person, the name he'd been arrested under. He hadn't done any of the crimes. Turns out it was true, but this was treated as a delusion until somebody finally researched it.
That's messed up.
If that had been a one-off, it would have been bad enough. But things like that happen on a pretty regular basis.
Doesn't surprise me. But yeah, I guess you could say that them believing the policeman was a hallucination on their part.
Of course. You think cops aren't crazy? Cops are crazy. Their craziness is in agreement with the consensus craziness, for the most part. Less so these days.
Yeah.
Which is why we're seeing more and more cops being arrested for doing stupid shit. So, what do you think this all means now that we've gone through everything? Here you have this story. Here you have this poem. It was, imagine that it was just delivered to you in this circle. What are you going to do with it? How is this going to help you take your next step? I think I'm going to switch now to Brady Bunch mode so that everybody watching this video can see you all sitting there asleep.
Oh man. So how about you, Levita? What are you thinking?
The gears are grinding over here.
Oh, grinding gears.
The only thing that I'm coming up with is that since the map is not the terrain, that you have to basically become and remain present to whatever's going on around you. But I already said that. So
Well, it sounds like that's a takeaway for you, though.
Yeah, and it
And
bears
that's good.
saying, it bears mentioning again. You can't hear that too many times.
Mm-hmm. Right.
David, any thoughts? I haven't picked on you yet.
I was thinking you might not be able to see where you're going. I think you can't see the next river, but you could predict that there was another river and that you would need to go.
If you could think ahead, you could very well do that.
Yep.
Mustaqim, impart to us your wisdom. Putting him on the spot here.
Yep. I don't have anything at the moment, he says. All right.
That in itself may be wisdom.
Jonathan, what do you think?
I want this video makes me want to ask, how deluded am I as to where I believe I am on the map? And I would want to ask people who I respect. So I have to know where I am on the map. I have to know if where I believe I am on the map is actually where I am on the map. Otherwise, I'm going to go nowhere, or everywhere I'll go is the wrong direction.
Now, here's the paradox with you, Jonathan. You are probably further along on the map than you think, but you're so hard on yourself that you're going to put yourself back at the beginning time and time again. Just a thought.
It's quite a paradox there.
Yeah.
Well taken.
Yeah, I mean, I have to be careful about that as well, Jonathan. So you're certainly, if that happens to be true for you, you would not be alone. Yeah.
Yeah, let me tell you, Nora's sitting around and she's going, oh, I'm terrible, I don't know anything, and I'm how can I be a great teacher one day? And it's like, my dear, do you notice that you're levitating 6 inches off the floor? No. You don't notice
ridiculous. That. Yeah, but yeah. I mean, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I certainly have seen the ways in which I can self-sabotage by, it's not that I need to think I'm hot shit, but it's kind of like respecting what I've learned so far. Does that make sense? Like, I have to trust and respect what I have learned. And as Mushtaq always says, don't let it go to my head, but to apply what I know. What's that?
So you say it back to me.
Mm-hmm.
We all need to hear that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's pretty much what we got for tonight. Next Sunday is the third Sunday of the month, which means we're doing 2 of these. 2.
Yes.
1 and 1 again. And it's going to be a 2-parter this time.
Oh, shit, really?
Yeah.
2-parter.
2-parter, yes. In order to get the entirety of next Sunday's teaching, you're going to have to listen to both videos or be at both videos. There is method to my madness.
Well, that's good. And I hope to be there for next week evening. I will be traveling next Sunday, but God willing, I will have been settled by the time the talk rolls around, but we shall see. If I'm not there, I will miss you guys very much.
Yes, I think the first talk's title will be Sufism, the Calvin Ball of Spiritual Paths. See how many get that.
Oh, wow.
Who here knows what Calvin Ball is?
No. All right, well, you guys are going to learn.
I may have to come up with another one, but
Yeah.
People don't know what Calvin Ball is?
That's sad.
Yeah.
Come on, guys. Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah, Calvin and Hobbes. Calvin and Hobbes invented a game called Calvin Ball, which is unique amongst games.
Aaron says, sounds familiar. Of course. He gets it now.
Yeah. So y'all have a week to find a few Calvin and Hobbes strips that can teach you about Calvin Ball.
All right, so you guys will have 2 talks next week to look forward to. And that's about it for this evening, huh?
Yep, that's about it.
Cool.
So, everybody, give us a
Brady
big
Bunch
wave,
Mode.
and we will see you next week.
See you